Good morning, daylighters. How's everybody doing today? Everybody's just doing good morning. Great. All right, so forgive me. I'm going to stand, I'm going to sit, I'm going to walk, but I have my parameters of how far I should or shouldn't go. And I may keep you maybe 2 or 3 minutes over, so please bear with me. Hopefully, it'll be worth it. So recently, I took a trip to England. We actually got to visit the birthplace of George Williams, who was the founder of the YMCA back in 1844. And we got to see some of the significant places that had to do with the development of this movement. And so, again, the title of this is from 18th to England and Beyond, a journey of joy. And so, in the background there is my job with the sign that says 18th Street, which will be significant as we go along. That's my one little bag and the first cool statue I saw when I got to England. So when I told people that I was going to London, I had 2 questions. One was, did I get to have fish and chips? And the other was it good? And you could tell by the dance that I did that the fish was pretty awesome. I actually had that standing under the London Bridge in the rain. So did I have fish and chips? I had significant fish and chips at a place that won the award for best fish and chips. So I think I did well. We also visited Germany, and there the Ys focus a lot more on youth development, addressing the housing crisis, and facilitating church services in different places. And if you look, depending on what side of the street you were standing on, you could either see YMCA or you would see CVJM. And if you notice in Germany, the C is at the front. This is Fortress Hohensalzburg. It was built in the 11th century, has never been attacked, and was 4,700 miles from my home. So this is in Austria, and of course I'm known for my snarky t-shirt, so I had to wait to break this one out. I actually had it a while ago, but I outgrew it, so I ended up in Austria saying, that's my shirt, I need to get that one. It says, no kangaroos in Austria, because I didn't see any. Now, prior to this is the only exposure I've had to castles. I had Castle Grayskull. Well, I didn't have it, but my neighbor had it. So vicariously, I played with Castle Grayskull, and of course, the castle in Versailles, Kentucky, that I burned down in 2004, but was rebuilt in 2008. So again, this is the only exposure that I had had to castles before this, but here I am on a castle in Salzburg, Austria, doing a presentation about joy on the last day of our trip. But how did we get here? How did I end up in this place? To better understand, let's look at the journey. Not just this journey, but the journey inside of the journeys. And it starts here. This is a map of a section of West Louisville, and as you can see, the blue line down the middle would be 18th Street. The yellow spots denote houses that I grew up in or that my family lived in. The green spots are developmental spots and stages in my life. There's the daycare that my mom was the assistant director of, the elementary school I went to, the Kingdom Hall I attended with my father, my high school, and one of those dots, remember the first time I was up here and I talked about how my mom had my brother and I playing a violin and a trombone doing Christmas carols. Well, that church is right there on 18th Street as well. You also have my first job ever and the job that I work currently. Each of these are within 2 to 3 stoplights of 18th Street. Also, quick, fun Quan fact, I didn't start driving until I was 30. So the 18 was the bus that I rode the most, and I rode it in a lot of different directions to a lot of different places. But I think it's safe to say that 18th Street was a main artery of some of my upbringing. And we'll see lots of references of 18 as we go along. But first, let me state this. This is my testimony, but I don't want that to be confused with a confession, okay? This is not a personal flex for me, but instead is me acknowledging how good God has been in my life and the different ways that he has and continues to bless me. Y'all ready to go on this journey with me? All right, let's go. Here's your first set of 18s. At 18, I was arrested for $42.39 worth of pizza. I used somebody else's credit card to order pizza. And because the way the charges were set up, I was facing 30 years in prison. The only thing that saved me was being enrolled in college, but that didn't last long. I spent 18 months in college, and once they kicked me out, when I went back home, I lasted at my mom's house for 18 weeks. I told you the number 18 is going to pop up a lot. This picture was taken a week before I went on this trip because I felt like I had to do some grounding for myself. Because again, this trip was like beyond anything that I would have ever imagined for myself. So much so at times I thought it wasn't even gonna happen. Like I would talk about packing and I would pack a little bit, but I was like, things like this never happen to me. And then when I said, okay, well, I guess this is happening, there was still something in my mind that said, Quan, this isn't going to work out the way that you think it is. So much so that I wrote out my last will and wishes and mailed it home and told Seglinda, don't open it unless you have to, because I felt like for some reason this just wasn't going to happen because this was too good to be true. And so to help center myself, I went back to this place. The lot here was a house that I lived in with my family at 10 and was the first house that I had on my own at 19. My rent at the time was $100 a month, and I had it, but paying it wasn't my priority. Instead, my priority was alcohol, drugs, and partying. But I don't have any pictures of that. Cameras and cell phones weren't as big then. Thank God. I avoided church and religion, and that was mirrored in my behaviors. To put it mildly, I was the wretch that they sung about in Amazing Grace. You could have referred to my home as my den of debauchery. And this was the first step in a back and forth pattern of being on my own, going back home. Being on my own, going back home. I showed up at my 10-year high school reunion on the bus. I didn't ride the 18 that day. unemployed, and having hard to believe stories of my girlfriend who was a cheerleader but happened to be in New Jersey for the summer. A quite believable story to show up to your 10-year reunion as. And I thought things were fine. But then one day I was on a bus and I heard how some kids were talking, and it upset me to the point that I got off the bus, and the person that was on the bus with me, that same cheerleader girlfriend, didn't even realize I had gotten off the bus. When we met up 2 stops later and I explained to her how hurt, how embarrassed, how frustrated I was, she said probably the most beneficial thing she said in the time that we were together. She said, "Well, you need to do something about it." What I realized in looking back at that was that I heard God whispering through loud children. I realized at that point that there was more to life than what I had been seeing. Again, I thought that everything was fine. This whisper started to change things in me. I understood that I was yearning for something, and maybe the answer was that I needed to do something about it. And that's when I walked into the YMCA. I've said before, and I mean this, getting hired at Safe Place Services probably saved my life. It gave me an opportunity for some level of retribution. You see, this is the first job where I actually had to give. Every other job was about sales or collections or competition. This was about giving. And when H talks about repenting, it's not just not doing the thing, it's turning away from it. And sometimes turning away from it means the opposite. And so any guilt that I felt about my arrest, about the choices that I had made, instead of stealing, now I have the opportunity to give. The opposite of stealing is not stealing, it's giving. The opposite of greed is generosity. And these things started to move around in my head, and I realized that I was putting the pieces of my puzzle-esque life together, but I knew that something was still missing. At 1 Peter chapter 4, verses 8 and 10, it says, "Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." So the things that jump out here are above all. That means, wait a minute, this sounds like love is important. It says to do so deeply. It gives an opportunity to serve other people. But in my case, from what I was trying to get away from, this is telling me that love covers sins. Does this mean that if I start to operate with love, does that mean that somehow I'm not who I used to be? And that part was what drew me. It's love. The biggest void in my life at that time was love. Not necessarily that I received, but that I gave. There wasn't any love at that picture of that lot that I showed. There wasn't love at 858, because love would have encouraged me to pay the rent to my family. Love would have encouraged me to do things different. So now I'm starting to understand love. And then I have a kid. and it completely changed how I looked at love. Becoming a father made me look at my parents with a different level of understanding about their care and concern for me, about how disappointments affected them, but above all, that there would always be love there. And then I transferred that to God. Is that how God looks at me at times as a child? Where he cares and he's concerned. And even when there is disappointment, I'm still loved. Is that what I'm figuring out? But then when you become a father, and doctors tell you to temper your expectations, they tell you to expect developmental delays and to celebrate every small little thing because that could be as good as it gets. You start to look for answers anywhere. And so with these whispers, what I had the chance to do was look back on my life. I looked back at what I had done. I looked back at what hadn't worked and knew that there had to be more. Now seeing that it was about more than just me, but it was about others and about this baby, and that I or we could not do that alone. So my upgraded lens of love allowed me to see it for the first time. What's the it? Joy. You see, joy was in the title of this, but why is it the first time that I'm mentioning joy? Because everything else was not a journey of joy. It was a hunt for happiness. And we can hunt for happiness in a lot of different places. I sure did. So that helped me to understand the difference between happiness and joy. You see, unknowingly within this job, I was in my purpose, but now I understood the why and the how. See, joy is one of the fruits of the Spirit. It's actually the second one behind love. So sequentially, I'm doing well. I had to see love. Then we got to joy. And then things started to change, and I was drawn closer to God through this newfound understanding of joy. So much so that very shortly after this, I got baptized. And a week after I got baptized, I got a promotion at my job. This is a photo of me with 0 gray hair back in 2010 when I did the closing prayer at the mayor's breakfast. So the person who asked me to do it, I said, yeah, I'll do it. But how did he know that that's where I was at? Was there something that he saw in how I was operating that suggested that I prayed at all, or that I would be willing to do a prayer at this event with 1,000 people? Was he aware that I had a speech impediment and that because of that, I would shy away from public speaking opportunities? Turns out that this is the same person who invited me to join the On Principle group that we'll talk about 13 years later. So, all right, let's hit a couple more 18s real quick. First time I attended Daylight Church was in 2018. Here's another one. I went out on my first date with this lovely lady on the 18th, and through some mathematical formula that she figured out, we got married on the 18th as well. But back to on Principle. This is a group of YMCA professionals across the country that are looking to see how Christian principles are being practiced throughout our branches. How can we make the C in YMCA stand out? This was the focus of this group, and there have been about 3 or 4 cohorts of this. When it was originally pitched, we were supposed to go to Jerusalem, but then 6 weeks before we were supposed to go, that's when the turmoil in that area of the country, of the world, escalated to war. And so we weren't able to go on that trip. So they would postpone it, reschedule it again, and then they came up with this alternative for us to go to England to study the beginnings of the YMCA. And so I understood collectively that this is what we were going to do. But selfishly, I'm like, what does God have in store for me? What are the different things that are going to happen with me joining this group and potentially going on this trip? What is possibly there? Well, within 2 months of going, I ended up baptizing a kid in the YMCA swimming pool. I even was going back and forth with H about if this is something I could even do. Within a year, I had done my first sermon, and I think it's cool that that picture has the same verse that all right, anyway. And I also officiated my first wedding. In each of these instances, I still did not believe that it was me doing these things or that God would utilize me to do these things. I was questioning if I was qualified while God was qualifying me. I found joy in spreading joy, and I believe that it brings God joy to see us love on people and to share that joy. Here's some more 18s. And like literally as I was adding all of these up, as I was thinking about this, I was like, this is kind of weird. But I was at Safe Place for 18 years before I accepted the position at the Y on 18th and Broadway. And my starting date was November 18th. You see this picture on the far right? That's me in 2017 standing on the site where we were cleaning so that they could break ground for this new YMCA to be built. The other picture is of me standing there after I had submitted a signed offer letter to become the first associate executive director at that branch. So again, if we go back to the map, from 19th and Broadway to 17th and Broadway, we're talking a 2-block journey that took 30 years. At the branch I work now, previously I had submitted 3 applications, got 0 official interviews, but that's where I work. There were times that I would drive past that branch as it was being built, after it was built, with my mom in the car saying, I'm going to work here one day. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how. There were times I even pulled up in the parking lot and said, I'm going to be here one day. I had no idea how that would happen, but it did and has. So since that program, the other things that are coming up, because again, when I went to visit the roots of the why, let me tell you what I didn't see. I didn't see a treadmill. I didn't see a swimming pool. I didn't see a weight bench. I don't know if you probably can't read what this plaque says, But this was where the first drape factory was, where the formation of the Y happened. And the Y started out as Bible studies. George Williams wanted to find a way to get people closer to Christ. And so it started through Bible studies. So since going through this program, we came back and started the Spiritual Emphasis Committee, where now within the YMCAs of Greater Louisville, we have a group to where we look and see what are the things that we can do to uplift the C in the YMCA. So we have a local version of that now. I have attended, Seglinda has chaperoned with me for the Christian Values Conference Teen Camp. And this year we're supposed to lead the cohort from Louisville to go to North Carolina in July to attend this camp. And in true Y fashion, since I have now visited the birthplace of the Y, starting in January, I'm going to start Bible studies at my YMCA. All of us are on at least one journey. It was a journey to get here this morning. What we think is a destination is sometimes a rest stop, a spot to recalibrate, or just a checkpoint. But with God's plans, that looks totally different. Notice that according to God's plan, there are valleys and peaks. And it looks like in these, there are challenges in those valleys, but each of those peaks is higher than the one before it, which would suggest that in those valleys is the conditioning and strength that you might need to make it to that next level. So yeah, like the Y, it sounds like exercise. But that's backed up in Scripture. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So this says that in times of trial, there should be joy. That challenges lead to completion. And please understand that joy does not mean that there won't be struggles. Joy means that you can find overwhelming relief and comfort in God's provisions. So what you all are about to see is like the world premiere of the video of my trip, but it's been enhanced a little bit. So I know everybody was expecting me to talk about my trip, so I'm going to give you that. So we're going to watch this. And again, as I said, my lens of joy adjusted. I knew I would be talking about joy. I knew it was going to be on the last day of the trip, but I did not know what I was going to say. So before I left, I said, Quan, just look for joy. Let's see what you can come up with.
We want to talk about joy, talk about me standing in front of the Alps, delivering a message that I would have never imagined would even be possible. On this trip, if you haven't found joy, you ain't been looking, because it's been around us the whole time. And in case you didn't know, I'm going to give you some examples and some of my thoughts in regards to joy. Joy is like happiness with an extended time release. Joy is more contagious than happiness. Happiness produces smiles, while joy sometimes produces tears. In Psalms 35, it says that weeping may endure, but joy comes in the morning. At John 16:33, we're reminded that we all experience troubles, but that he has already overcome the world. So even if we're fretting now, the verse before that suggests that the joy's coming. It's on its way. My child gave me a Christmas gift this past Christmas, and I was happy to see that I had an apron. But I was joyous that they had found a way to transcribe my name on it in my mom's handwriting. So I wasn't just happy to receive the gift. That gift brought me joy.
Yeah.
Does that help explain the difference?
Yeah, sure.
I was happy to be included in this group, but I was joyous when we met. On the very first Zoom call that we had, in our chat room was myself, Steve Tarver, and Chris Spivey. When he talked about his daughter, Araya, and I told him, when I see you, we're skipping handshakes, we're hugging. And we've been hugging ever since. That's joy.
All right. Yeah.
There was joy in his message, and it brought me resolve and optimism. I was happy when the trip was scheduled, and then rescheduled, and then rescheduled again, but found joy when we landed in England. I found joy when my bag was only 44 pounds, so I didn't have to worry about paying extra. Right after I did that and had kissed my wife and was kind of tearful and standing there by myself, I turned around, and in the window of the airport was the word joy. I didn't put it there. It was already there. I found joy in a delayed flight, because as we sat there and waited, our group from South Carolina would have had to be on another plane had that plane not be delayed. I've said the joy in greeting Chris with the hug, joy in finding the right tea when I realized that's the one thing, well, one of four things that I forgot to pack. Joy in us doing the electric slide in the middle of the street in a lost and damaged megabus surrounded by sheep. Even after all the animals and even the locals were sitting there looking at us, wondering what we were doing. We found joy. We found joy when we prayed in a bar in Minehead after doing a Soul Train line with the staff from the hotel. We found joy in the quiet time at Tar Steps. I found joy in finding a hat for a pretty good price. Joy in the London skyline at night. Joy in seeing the good work being done in England. Joy in sharing communion and blessing that housing unit. Joy in enlightenment and forgiveness. Joy in Les Mis. Joy in a stupid box of fish and chips.
Yes.
Joy in the historic London sights. Joy in that baby smile on that flight to Germany. Joy in a bigger bed. Joy in the open ears and delay and hearts of those that I shared with. Joy in being welcomed. Joy in the church service, and even with the language barrier and the technical difficulties, I know when I hear and see Jesus, and joy. Joy in the impromptu concert in the Munich town square. Joy in our reflections last night. And so I think for all of us, we've mentioned it, we've loved this trip, and we're happy that we'll be going home. But joy will hit when we finally get there, right? So we have been on a mission of delivering joy to everybody that we have encountered on this trip. From Andy to Alex to the Minehead staff to Sean the leprechaun, like everybody except maybe the bartender from last night. But everybody else who encountered us had a good dose of joy from their newfound friends from the YMCAs across America.
All right.
Let's
Good.
go.
Now, y'all know I didn't put that together, but I will share those congratulations with the person who helped me. Ironically, as we talk about joy and I start to wrap up, the person that helped me put that video together was also the person who produced the 2 albums where I talked about all of the den of debauchery stuff. So maybe through me, I'm like sharing some joy with him, and so maybe this is a whisper for him. We'll see if he's watching. So, in summary, Again, this was my story, but it's about his glory. Take me out of it. I am the pawn. I've eventually said yes to allowing God to use me. Understand that in your journeys, valleys are just as much a part of it as the peaks are, but learn to embrace both. When you wonder where you are going, remind yourself of where you have been. Love is the lens. We talk about that being first and being key. Lead with love. Lastly, be and see joy anywhere you can.